Hi everybody, welcome to my Two Girls in a Kit first video sharing my watercolor technique. I'm going to be using the kit that I put together using our May mood board. I grabbed some enamel dots, some crochet flowers, a photo, studio calico wood veneer, a 6x6 paper pack from Glitz from the 77 line, and I decided to use that floral paper, and then also that little piece of the cut apart sheet from the mini 6x6 pack that's black and white stripe. Also this overlay from crepe paper, and this Amy Tangerine paper from the +1 line. It's a feather. The confetti punch, my watercolor set, this sheet of pretty pink and blue paper from the Carpe Diem Glitz line, that yellow cardstock, some pink vellum, some black cardstock, it's gray on the back side, and then this green glitter specialty paper, and I just end up using that little triangle piece. And then for my main background, I'm using the pink paisley color wash paper, that's that triangle, and then this Glitz ombre orange paper from the 77 line, and then the Carpe Diem sticker sheet. So first thing I'm going to do is grab my watercolor set and work on my watercolor background. And I am by no means an expert in watercolor. I just really enjoy playing with it. I think it's super pretty. You know, it's very light and sweet, and it's just a really nice little effect that you can add to your background. And you can see I started out with that tiny brush. I wasn't happy with it, so I just switched to this big one. And I switched from dipping my brush into the water and then into the watercolor to just straight dipping my brush into the water, getting my background paper nice and wet, and then dipping into the color that I want to use. And it just makes the color just kind of flow a little more naturally rather than in a specific direction. And for my background, I just followed the colors on the pink paisley background paper. I did a little bit of gray and then orange, and now I'm doing some pink, and then I'll add a little bit of yellow, and that's just to add a little bit of extra texture and movement to the background. And watercolor dries a lot lighter than it appears. So the way it looks now, even though it's still really light, it's going to dry even lighter. The other thing I'd like to mention is that I added this freezer paper down because my paper was getting really, really wet. I didn't want it to break or tear, and so I was afraid of it sticking to my tabletop. And so using the parchment paper, I thought helped kind of make my work surface a little easier for using watercolor. And then I'm using my heating tool to dry it. If you want to not have your paper buckle quite as much from using watercolor on your background, you can put gesso down first, and it's a nice base, and it'll keep your paper from buckling. It won't buckle much at all. I don't mind it. It didn't bother me, so I didn't do that. I also really wanted to see the background, and using the gesso, you know, it's not super opaque, but it is fairly opaque, so it covers quite a bit of it up, and I didn't want to do that. So I figured I would just deal with a little extra buckle, and I'm perfectly happy with the final result. I just trimmed a 1/2 inch off the bottom and the right side, and that's because I'm going to mount it to another sheet of paper, and then I'm just choosing my layers to add on my page, and my photo's just going to go right on top. I like lots of layers. I like to add lots of paper, lots of different papers, lots of different patterns, lots of color, and I find that one of the easiest ways to do that is just layer underneath my photo. So and now what I'm going to do is I'm taking my confetti punch, and I'm going to punch out some confetti out of my yellow cardstock, and you can see I have a little bit punched out already. And I'm going to adhere that as part of my background. So I'm taking my spray adhesive and just spraying it all over the base of my background. And you want to make sure to spray enough so it's nice and sticky. You also want to make sure you're doing it in a very well ventilated area. I was fairly concerned about the odor and the fumes. So I did not spray as much as I probably should have because I tested this technique out before shooting the video, and my confetti stayed really well. And you can see throughout the video that it doesn't stay quite as well as I would have hoped. And that's just because I didn't use as much spray adhesive as I should have. And then I took the Krylon Crystal Clear and sprayed that over the top of everything. And the reason I did that is because the spray adhesive, if you have much experience using spray adhesive, when it dries, it's still sticky. And no one wants their layout to stay sticky. So the Krylon Crystal Clear, if you spray it over the top of your spray adhesive, it makes the stickiness totally go away and you're just left with a nice smooth surface. So that worked really well. You can see quite a few of my little confetti came off, but some of it's still there, and so that works. Now I'm going to go ahead and work on my background a little bit more. So I'm going to start adding my layers, and I'm not necessarily lining them up so they're straight. I'm going to kind of put them down in all different directions, a little cattywampus. So there's the vellum and then the pretty floral paper, and I'm just leaving a little bit showing on each, either the right side or the left side or the top or the bottom, and I'm kind of rotating. And then I'm just going to go ahead and add my photo once I'm all done. And to help make these layers kind of feel like they belong on the page instead of looking super crisp and clean and perfect, I wanted them to kind of blend with the background a little bit more. So I just dipped my brush in some water and added a little water along the outside of my layers, and then I went in with my watercolors and added the watercolors in. A little bit of gray and orange and pink and a little bit of yellow. And it's definitely a lot of water. And I don't necessarily always like the distressed look per se, if you would even call this distressed, but it's definitely something that I thought went well with the layout and definitely a fun technique. So I'm just taking my paper towel and dabbing up the excess water, and it just gave those layered papers that are going behind the photo just a hint of color, not a lot. And then I'm taking my heating tool and drying it off, and it's definitely make a mistake here using the heating tool on the vellum as well as the overlay. They're very badly warped. Luckily I had doubles, so I was able to replace them. But if you do decide to use similar products, I just forgot that the heating tool would warp them so badly. So try not to make that same mistake if you can. And then I have all my layers down, ready for my photo. So next what I'm going to do is grab my sewing machine, and I just want the layers, since they're kind of adhered temporarily with my adhesive in the very middle, I'm just going to do something a little more permanent and sew down just in the center of the layers all together onto my background paper. And I'm just doing it in the center so that the edges stay open. That way I can layer underneath them if I need to, and it makes it easier to work with depending on how much you want to layer and not necessarily plan ahead of time. I cut the thread off of the back side but left it loose on the front, and that's just to add a nice little bit of added texture on the front of my page. And then I'm going to take my foam adhesive and use it on the back of my photo just to give it a little bit extra lift, since I do have a lot of texture and depth going on from my background paper being a little warped from the water. And then I'm going to pull my layers around the photo up, and since I did use watercolor on them, they're nice and stiff, so I'm going to pull them up and They stay up really nicely, and they definitely add to the look. So next I'm just going to take the gold color shine, and I did a fine mist over the top, and then I went and grabbed and just did a couple splatters as well. And I was too impatient to let it dry, so I took my paper towel and just kind of dabbed it where I had used the color shine, and it picked up any little extra going on and left a nice kind of gold shine on my page. So next I'm going to work on my title, and you can see I just drew a rectangle that's roughly the same height as my photo. And I'm going to take straight from the mood board the "You Are Loved" text that looks like it's handwritten and then hand cut out with scissors. And that's what I'm going to attempt to do for my title. So I'm just drawing the "You Are Loved." And I found that in trying to replicate this technique, keeping everything as boxy or linear as possible definitely adds to the graphic aspect of it, and it just looks really nice. So I'm going to cut each little section out, and I'm going to trim the tops and the bottoms. Also, there's similar heights. You can see I'm trimming the bottom and then the top and then the bottom, and again, it helps make it more linear. And then same thing, trimming the right sides, all about the same amount, so that they end up being similar in size, and then the left sides. And then I go through and I start to cut out each individual letter, and each individual letter is now a rectangle or a square. And from that rectangle or square, I decide how I want to give it shape to make it a letter. And I try and do as little shaping as possible so that it's just as many clean cut lines as possible. And I think, again, it just adds to the fun kind of graphic element and a fun kind of technique for doing this. And one of the mistakes that I made was I didn't want the pencil marks to show on my paper, so I spelled out the "You Are Loved" on the back side of my cardstock, but I forgot that some of the letters needed to be spelled backwards. So you can see my L's backwards and then my R is backwards, but I go in and fix that later and switch them out. And now I'm just going through and, again, just trimming, trying to keep things as close to the square or rectangle original cut as possible. And you can see I didn't film quite the entire process, and that's partially because it's kind of boring, and then also because, and then there I switch out the L. Also because my battery was starting to look like it might be running low, and I didn't want to have to worry about that. So there it is. It says "You Are Loved." And it's a nice little personal hand-drawn and cut out title. And I chose black because, you know, the photo is just so dark. I wanted it to complement the layout well, but I also really wanted the layout to feel very light and springy and airy, also with, you know, some bright colors with the orange, and feel really happy. So now for the embellishments, I took some of my crocheted flowers, some enamel dots, some of the Studio Calico wood veneer, and I'm just kind of placing them on the page. Here's some of the little extra snippets that I grabbed from various specialty papers and cut apart sheets. And I decided I wanted to add a little bit extra to the bottom of my photo, so I'm creating, I guess it's kind of called a banner, but they're basically just layering some triangles. So then I'm taking my favorite adhesive, which is called the Ultimate, and just layering them in underneath my layers, which I wouldn't have been able to do if I had adhered my layers all the way to the edge instead of just the center. And then you can see with that green glitter paper, I'm kind of layering it with the thread to kind of make that pop a little bit. Now I'm going to add my crochet flowers. Again, using the Ultimate Glue. And that glue is my favorite all-purpose glue. It adheres to fabric, glass, metal, wood, plastic, paper, pretty much everything. And then I went and grabbed some stickers from the sticker sheet and some talcum powder in a little jar. And I'm just using the talcum powder on the back of the stickers to take the sticky part off, make it go away so I can layer them on my page. And when I put them in my page protector, I don't have part of the sticker adhering to the page in a way that I don't want. So I'm going to take some of the little wood veneer circles and pull a couple of those out. And what I'm going to do is take one of the small size of circles and just adhere it right underneath the heart of that arrow sticker. And it's kind of a fun little way of not having to use the foam adhesive. And I would totally be okay if the wood veneer showed underneath the heart. It doesn't really, but I think it's nice. I liked the idea of using that. So now I'm just adding my wood veneer inside some of the flowers, and then I punched an extra circle out to put inside the white flower, and then I'm going to take an enamel dot, one of the light kind of peachy pink colors, and layer it in there. And then I'm going to take another wood veneer and put it inside the yellow flower, and then a gray enamel dot and kind of layer it up. And then I'm just going to take the rest of my wood veneers and enamel dots and kind of place them different places on the background. So for adhering the extra stickers, that little sheet says, or that little piece says Carpe Diem, and I just adhered it to the left side and then kind of pulled the right side up to give it a nice little lift. And then the other two stickers say Good Times. And this photo's from when my sister and I went and saw The Great Gatsby in 3D. And we had so much fun. It was my second time seeing it and her first time. And we really enjoyed it. And so we decided to take a picture afterwards with our 3D glasses. And we had a great time. So this is one of my favorite photos of us together. Such a fun night. And of course the You Are Loved is perfect because I do love her lots. And to make my title, to give it, like to make it stand out really nicely, I decided to cut some of the foam adhesive and put it behind the letters. And that, you know, just gives it a nice little extra depth. It does make it stand out a little bit more. First I adhered the bottom left, and then the upper left, and then I'm kind of trying to fill in the middle on the left hand side. And again, I'm kind of just trying to think of this like it's a big rectangle. So like right now it kind of looks like an L with the Y-A-L and the E and the D. And now I'm going to go ahead and try and line up the right sides. And you can see I kind of fiddle with it a little bit. I can be fairly particular about these kind of things, and I'm not as bad as I used to be, but I do still kind of go a little bit overboard sometimes. So I fiddle with it a little, but not too much. And yep, there you can see me trying to line up the right side. And then once I have the bottom side, the left side, and the right side lined up, I go and I deal with the middle pieces. So the You Are Loved is the title for my layout. I didn't end up using any thickers or sticker letters, which is super rare for me. And I couldn't be happier. I think this was super fun. I loved it. It's a nice kind of little fun added technique to the watercolor for this project. So next what I'm going to do is take my double-sided tape, and it's very strong, and I'm going to cover it all over the back to adhere it to another sheet of paper, and that's because, as you can see, it did buckle quite a bit from using the watercolor and all the water saturating it. And using the double-sided tape really helps straighten it out and keep it nice and flat. You can see at first I added a little bit, and then I grab my background paper and trim off the little excess piece. And then I go back to my background and decide that I wanted to add more adhesive, just in case. And putting this on my background, I wasn't quite as careful as I could have been. I start on the lower right hand side and then work my way up, and then go from the right to the left hand side, adhering it to my background. And I think if I had been a little more careful and gone a little slower, I would have done a little bit better job. But you can see I'm pretty close with patting it down and getting it flat and getting it lined up. Because I didn't do it perfect, you can see there is a little bit of wrinkle in the paper, and it's not perfectly lined up. I kind of overlapped on the bottom a little bit, and I end up having to cut that off. But I think it's nice. I think it turned out great. It has lots of character, lots of energy. It's super fun. You can see me turning it around and trimming that back side off to make it a nice square layout. And then I did not film this part, but from there I took it to my sewing machine and just sewed a border all the way around the edge. And now I'm pulling it up just to kind of, again, since I have those nice little wrinkles in the paper, pulling up the edges just gives it a nice little extra something. So, and then for some of the detailed shots, you can see the sewing, all the layers, the watercolor, the title, and the fun confetti that we did. And that is pretty much it. Thank you so much for joining me for my first 2 girls and a kit video. I hope you have fun with the watercolor technique, and I think it would be super fun for Project Life, cards, mini books, other layouts. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to ask, and I'll see you next week for my next 2 girls and a kit video. Thanks! Bye!